professional like.
Oh, it's so professional. You even get a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, and welcome to Lit Bashing. I'm here, and so is
Robin Windon.
Hello, Robin. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad. So have you recovered from the weekend yet?
Only just.
Only just. So I suppose I've got a bunch of questions just off the top of my head about your army list, about the weekend, about how you thought it went, any advice you've got for, I'm sure, the countless Games Workshop employees who are carefully watching this random video on the internet to find out how to do better. So to start off with, how was the weekend? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, I absolutely loved it from beginning to end. It was amazing. Just the people, the atmosphere, the armies, the game. It was amazing.
Well, that's good, because I mean, if you'd won and I'd said, "Did you enjoy it?" and you said, "No, it was rubbish," that would have been a bit of an anticlimax to the interview, really. So it's good job.
It would have.
So I know we've spoken a little bit about your list. I suppose, yeah. Tell me about it. What made you choose the legions you chose to start off with? I know you said the Imperial Fists are your babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've always been a Blood Angel player, weirdly, which has always then led me to the Imperial Fists in Heresy games because of the lore of the Battle at the Emperor's Palace. They just always seemed like a great pairing to me. So when I first started with Legion Imperialis, it was Blood Angels Assault contingencies and Imperial Fist missile launchers and like holding units. And when I first started to design the list for the event, I decided that I'd use World Eaters instead. I felt that originally I felt that their Legion trait was better than the Blood Angels, which I've now changed my mind on after the weekend, actually. So weirdly, but through playtesting, I never actually got to play any big games of Legion Imperialis while playtesting for the event, and I only actually got like 5 games in pre-event. So, but during those games, I realised that I just couldn't compete in the anti-air race if I wanted to do all the stuff I wanted to do on the ground, such as taking my Titan and stuff like that, because I was just getting out activation. My aircraft were coming on and they were just getting blown out of the sky by Solar Auxilia Lightnings with their 30-inch range and their intercept and stuff like that. So I kind of went back to the drawing board after a couple of games of just having my Thunderhawks blown up the second they came on, and realised that I was building a ground list. So I looked at doing all Imperial Fists and just taking the centre point with missile launchers. I did have one list that had 96 missile launcher bases in it, and then realised that I was never going to get hold of 96 missile launcher bases, nor get that many painted up in time. So I started to play around with some other ideas, and a friend of mine, the friend that I played my games against, he once fielded a Solar Auxilia list that was purely the Pioneer companies. So it was all Venatari and the Sentinels. And
those were the scariest lists I faced.
But like literally, it was 1,500 points of that. That was all it was, and it started 4 inches away from me. And the second I moved, the Sentinels overwatched me, and then the Venatari charged what was left. And from that game, I realised that Infiltrate was useful, was quite powerful, to be honest. And then I looked at the Raven Guard, because they're able to infiltrate, but they're only able to infiltrate their infantry. And then I looked at Alpha Legion and realised that I could infiltrate Dreadnoughts with Alpha Legion. In fact, I had originally thought about infiltrating Kratos, but then I decided, due to a lot of games against Lehman Russes, that I wasn't going to take any armour either, apart from the Rhinos that I took, because they would just melt if I came against any great number of Vanquisher cannons. And one of the chaps locally who was originally thinking of going to the event had 52 of them. And I decided I just didn't want tanks against something like that.
Yeah, I wish I'd done that in retrospect. Like I said in my breakdown video, that my tanks just popped. There was just so much anti-tank on the board that it was a lot of points. I mean, there were distractions. They kept people away from shooting my infantry, but in terms of actually winning their points back aggressively, they didn't tend to. One game accepted. Yeah, just it seems unless you can spam Lehman Russes at the moment, tanks seem to be underperforming compared to infantry and walkers and aircraft.
Yeah, they're definitely in a weird position. Only competitively, obviously. I've played a game where we didn't use our competitive lists, and tanks were amazing, but that's because we had a solid amount of each thing rather than having a list that lent into one of the types. Um, and when it's built like that, then they can be really good because you get the tanks fighting the tanks and the infantry fighting the infantry. But when you look at a competitive list where people are obviously going to take things that they know are going to do well, then my thoughts at list building were mitigate those rock paper scissor moments where you're like, oh, if I put down my Kratos against 30 Lehman Russes, then my Kratos are toast. So I just won't take any, and it was almost trying to make myself the scissor to everyone else's paper as much as possible, and trying to get into that situation where whatever I put down had a chance of doing a thing, which is why I fell down on the side of Dreadnoughts heavily, because as you said in your roundup video, they're kind of the best of both worlds when it comes to armor and infantry. You know, they have that invulnerable save, they've got a good save anyway, they're armored, so light weaponry is less effective against them. They aren't vehicles, so they're not affected by stuff like armor bane, but they have the kind of the anti-tank and stuff that smaller tanks can have, especially in the what is it that they've got the cyclone melter lances on the Leviathans. Though I never actually fired my Leviathans once in the entire weekend.
Yeah,
They
the
just
same. I particularly my melter lances. I did get to fire the storm cannon ones a couple of times, but my melter lance ones just tended to scare people and get into combat.
yeah. I even forgot that you could use the defensive fire weapons before you moved, so I never even fired any of the defensive fire weapons because I always had it in my brain that you fired them after you moved. So by the time they moved, they were in combat. So I
Yeah.
didn't fire a single shot from any of my 24 Leviathans over the weekend, which I wish I had.
But they're scary and beautiful, so that's something.
I love the model as well. I know it gets a lot of flack for having 5 pieces for its legs, but
Yeah.
I love the model. It's such a beautiful. It's one of my favorite dreadnoughts in full size as well. So
Yeah, I
being able to have
find
those is cool.
with at this scale, the models that go together in 3 or 4 pieces, like the rhinos and stuff like that, tiny little exhausts notwithstanding, they're fine. But when you get to the drop pods, the Leviathan dreadnoughts, the ones which are like building a 28mm model but very very small, you do get a lot more detail because you're not having to worry about those kind of the flash lines and the gates for the molds and stuff. It's just, yeah, there's a lot to be said for the multi-part models at this scale, even if when you're trying to get a piece in and it goes flying across the room and you have to search around for it.
So
Yeah,
many times.
speaking of which, I remember the days when Games Workshop stores had red carpets, which was much better than nowadays when they all have this kind of grey, white, black carpet that seems designed to lose little bits on.
That's because it is designed to lose little bits. Well, it's not designed to lose little bits on. It's designed so the carpet around the modelling table doesn't just look messy all the time.
So that's a less skeptical way of looking at it than going like, no, they want you to lose the one bit, so you have to buy a whole new kit.
I don't think they're quite that
No,
diabolical in
no, no,
genius.
not quite yet. So something that was interesting when talking to you was that your list was entirely theory crafted? Like you said that you hadn't played any big games, you never got to use this list. It was purely just theory, Mathhammer, just on paper. How does that go?
Well, apparently it went quite well.
Yeah.
It worked out well for me. Well, like I say, all the games I played were with Imperial Fists and Blood Angels, or Imperial Fists and World Eaters. And it wasn't until the last game that I played against this Pioneer company that I saw the power of Infiltrate, and Rend as well. Seeing those Venatari with their 3 dice in combat. So yeah, I just kind of went to the drawing board, looked at the rules, and I knew that my Imperial Fists did their thing, because in every game that I played, they did their thing. And all of the games that I played had either been 500 points or 1500 points, so I hadn't even managed to use my double Imperial Fist idea. Yeah, it was just a lot of sitting and chatting, sitting and talking to my play group down here, and just kind of picking the rules and realizing the interactions that you could get, like being able to infiltrate some command bases from the Alpha Legion, so that when my Imperial Fists jumped out of their rhinos, then that command base was able to turn them from advanced to first fire.
Nice.
Which then meant that Imperial Fists could do their thing quicker, because they can either move or get their reroll. But in that case, because of how the tactical genius, I call it, works, is the unit can't have activated, so you can't run Imperial Fists forward and then change them later, because they can't have activated in that turn at all, that round at all. So it kind of really has to be done in the movement phase. So that infiltrate mechanic really came in clutch in putting my command bases in the right place to allow those Imperial Fists to jump out and get on first fire, infiltrating Leviathans 4 inches away from the enemy deployment zone, or any enemy models. Really, it meant that you had to deal with them straight away. And yeah, so that all kind of came out on paper rather than playtest, but that they were solid ideas using the rules, and just kind of sitting down and seeing the interactions there. So I was very lucky. I said to a lot of my friends that this list is either going to do really, really well because I'll have crafted it well, or I'll get to the first game and realize, oh my God, I've made such a terrible, terrible mistake with it. Luckily, it went the first way rather than the second way. But I think there's a lot to be said to talking to your friends, talking to the play group around you, and getting those games in, even if they're smaller games, against different rules, because it's not necessarily the exact rule of the exact model. Like, I never played against any Leviathans. I didn't see how that they would react. But I played against infiltrating things, and I played against things with Rend, and realized that those two things on their own were good. And if I could put them together, then that must be double good, right? And it turned out
that's called Mathhammer for those of you looking at home.
Yes.
If I do 2 good things, that makes double good.
Double good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the theory crafting side of it and the Mathhammer side of it were just to make sure I was taking the right things, really. But again, it still came down to what did I feel was cool. Like, I went for the Leviathans over the Dreadnoughts because I loved the Leviathan models. So my anti-air was a little bit lacking. I wish I'd taken some Dreadnoughts instead of the Tarantulas that I took. But you can't cover every base amazingly, so you just have to kind of go, okay, well, I'm not quite going to take the best thing here, and I'll try and cover it with this, and it worked. It's weird how well it worked, without a chance to play it. I was fretting a little bit getting towards the event where I hadn't managed to get a game in with the whole list, and I was so worried that it was just going to fall down around my ears. But it didn't. So yeah, just chat with some friends, chat with your play group, and play as many different things not necessarily play them yourself, but play against a whole bunch of stuff, the different rules, and just see the interactions, and then sit down and see how you can make them work for you.
It'll be interesting to see how the kind of meta evolves, given that at the moment it seems very much, infantry is king, fast transport is king, battle tanks not so much. But then it'll be interesting to see whether, I don't know, whether people start automatically, like you say, finding a rock to that and now scissors that previously beat the paper, bringing along lots of anti-infantry stuff. At which point, where will it balance? That'll be interesting to see in the coming however long that we're all playing this game.
I think one of the things you said in your roundup video is going to make a bit of a switch, which is when we first started looking at the rules, we all went, "Oh my god, why would I put las cannons on my spot? Why would I put anything but las cannons on my sponsons?" And now I'm looking at the Kratoses and going, "Yeah, or I could cover them with point defense weapons, run forward, blow a bunch of infantry up, and then still have the anti-tank battle cannon on the top to take out whether it be tanks, titans, anything like that as well." So I think that we might see battle tanks come back when people start building them less focused on just taking out other tanks.
Yeah, I think, although speaking of las cannons versus point defense and bolters, I noticed you did opt for the all las contemptors. You weren't tempted by the Kiri's assault cannon that not everyone's the biggest fan of. It looks great. It's my favorite weapon to look at. But yeah, on paper, I really want to be able to use it. At the moment, the only way I think I could use it is if I build it specifically into a Sons of Horus drop pod detachment where you're close enough to make use of the fact it's light. But even then, it's hard to see how it's going to be at all better than the las cannons.
See, that's I'm just pulling up the rules for it now. That's the problem I had with them. I adore the model for the assault cannon and the daka idea on Dreadnoughts from when I first watched the first Dawn of War intro cinematic, when you've got the Dreadnought there with the assault cannon that just blows away all the orcs, is amazing. But it's just, it falls down in every area. It's only 10 inches. It's 5 up to hit rather than 4 up to hit. It's still only -1, but it's light AT, so you're only really getting that against certain units. It's got the rapid fire, but like you say, it was never getting close. That because I was so afraid of tanks as well, that was the other thing, is because I wasn't taking tanks, I opted for them to take out tanks. And the other thing is they're accurate. The fact they're accurate, which makes them half decent anti-air as well, because hitting on 6s, but with the reroll, if you Mathhammer it, you're actually hitting on 5s, kind of thing. 22-inch range. They were so versatile that in a list that I hadn't tested, I was trying to get everything to be able to do at least 2 things. If try and be amazing at one thing and then be all right at another thing. And also with them not being able to infiltrate because they were Imperial Fist contemptors, I knew that I needed the range on them for them to be effective. And knowing that we were only going to get a couple of turns, because I know how long my 1,500-point games were taking, and they were taking nearly 3 hours. And then I was like, I'm putting another 1,000 points down on the table. It's going to take even longer. So I wanted them to get into the fight as quickly as possible. And if I'd have taken something like the Kerries, then I'd have needed to march them the first turn, so they wouldn't have done anything. They'd have been dead points in the first turn. And then would they have done anything in the second turn? Because maybe they'd have been able to start shooting, but that would not have got their assault, their rapid fire in, because they're not going to be close enough. And the las cannons on them, and they're not point defense. Had they been point defense, then maybe, but they don't even have that point defense thing to move and shoot with.
If the Kiri's assault cannons get given point defense in an errata or something coming up, that will make them definitely.
I think they'd be legit.
Yeah,
legit.
That might be all they need.
Or
anyone out
dice.
there, anyone out there who hasn't experienced the joys of point defense yet.
It is so. It's why I don't leave like home, my rhinos all have the havoc launchers on them, because I know their normal bolters are point defense as well, but
Yeah.
the havoc launchers being able to not be light so they can affect tanks, 15-inch range instead of 8-inch range. For the extra 2 points, they just add so much versatility to a unit that's going to raz forward 18 inches in the first turn, and then still be able to fire 15 inches off of that. Like, point defense is so good.
How did you source so many? Did you locate them? Did you
Oh,
just
my
buy a
my
bajillion?
havoc launchers are converted.
Are
I,
they awesome?
yeah, my havoc launchers are I use styrene rod. So they look like the ones off of the Chaos kit, because the Chaos kit is supposed to be the stuff
Yeah.
that was around during the Heresy back in the olden fluff. So they're the 4x2 kind of rocket pod looking ones, rather than the kind of the really modern looking ones from
Hmm.
the kit. But yeah, I converted them up to look like the old
Nice.
Chaos sprue
I've been
ones.
using Sentinel arms turned on their side as
Yeah,
havoc launchers. So far, only for aesthetic havoc launchers, because I like the Sicarans to have that little missile pod on top. I know it has no rules, but I just think it's quite an iconic image having the little missile pod on top. So my Sicarans have that. But yeah, I think certainly anyone out there who's bought lots of the um, kind of starter kits and have lots of Sentinels they don't plan on using, the arms make good havoc launchers.
a friend of mine does that, and they look
Yeah,
amazing. So yeah, just find some way to put havoc launchers in all of
yeah.
your rider.
So I mean, I've got your list up here, and I was going to start talking about that. But since we're talking about conversions, I think it is worth saying, and I mentioned this on the roundup as well. Like this all sounds very kind of like sweaty and mathsy and stuff, but it was not like that. There were a couple of armies there that were kind of sprayed and top sprayed, and obviously, I don't criticize people too much, because it's a lot to paint in a very relatively short period of time. Um, so not everyone could put all the effort in. People have different lives and stuff, but that notwithstanding, the amount of effort you'd put into your army, both in terms of the fluff, in terms of making sure like all your missile launchers were underslung, conversions from your Imperial fists, and you had tiny little transfers on every shoulder pad. It was it was an amazing army to look at, which was great, because it always feels worse when the winner is someone who's just kind of sprayed and washed an army. So it was nice to know that you obviously love this army a lot and you care about the game. And I think you said it takes you about an hour a base or something. So
Hour and a half to do my Imperial Fist, my yellow Imperial Fist missile launchers. Uh, but then they're my guys. I say yellow, people who haven't seen my army, because I had two formations of Imperial Fists, and I wanted them to be easier for my opponent to pick out, especially in a big melee. And like when it gets messy towards the end, it was getting crazy. I did one of my formations as your standard Imperial Fists in the yellow. They've got shoulder slung missile launchers. Like they're all like great and Imperial Fisty. And then I did another in Corvus Black with yellow shoulder pads, which were a destroyer formation, and they're the ones with the underslung missiles. They're all a bit scorched and battered and stuff. There's even in there a couple that I've turned into the Iron Armor Mark III by taking the heads and shoulder pads off of the tank crew and cutting them off of the dudes and turning them into Mark III. It had been my hope, and it is my dream at some point, to turn that entire formation into Mark III as their
awesome.
destroyers, with the right helmets and the right shoulder pads. Um, but yeah, I loved converting it. Like all of my Imperial Fist sergeants have power fists, and Volkites. My Imperial Fist commander in the true Imperial Fist formation has a Volkite and a power fist, whereas the one leading the destroyed detachment has twin Volkite, because I wanted to go for that kind of Moritat feel of having the two weapons. Um, all of my Alpha Legion infantry sergeants have Auspexes, because they're supposed to be like stealthy and would need to know where the enemy were and stuff like that. So I used the missile launcher sergeant with the Auspex and gave him the arm from the chainsaw arm from the apothecary. Um, I even gave the commanders of my Alpha Legion chainsaws, because they were they were less about the frill and the kit and more about the getting in and just doing the job and stuff like that. So I put an awful lot of effort into converting the models before I even put paint to model. Um, and then the conversions on the destroyers would take me a while. Um, so each base, especially the Imperial Fist ones, were about an hour and a half total to put together and paint. Whether it was the destroyers, which was slightly quicker to paint, harder to build, and the Imperial Fist, the other Imperial Fists that were easier to build and slightly harder, longer to paint because they're edge highlighted, they're washed, they're glazed, they're I had to touch up their helmets so many times, doing the eyes, making them look like they've got massive eyes and stuff like that, and having to go back and do that. I wanted it to look good because I was building it. It just so happened to work. The list really worked. The list did everything I wanted it to do. But when I was building it, I didn't know that. I didn't know it would do so well. So I wanted it to look good. I wanted people to enjoy playing it. If it was going to spend 5 games getting crushed, I wanted it to look good so people still came away from the game and went, "No, that army did really badly, but it looked amazing."
Yeah.
Luckily, it got to look amazing and did really well, which was great. But yeah, a lot of my friends thought I was a crazy person for 8mm kit bashing.
Hey, we are on this channel. Everyone watching this is a crazy person by almost definition. You know, epic scale. I say this every time. It's so forgiving. I think because it's so small and you see it from so far away. It's like looking at any model from further away. It looks better, and you're automatically looking at these from further away because they're small. And even the armies that were just kind of just a single wash, like I think there was a Blood Angels army and an Emperor's Children army that were just very heavy on the spray and wash, but they still look great. Like a whole table full of them, it looks amazing. And I think that's something that if anyone is watching and wants to go into epic scale painting and modeling, do it. It will look amazing. You'll think, wow, I never realized I could paint that well. It's such a good scale for
It is.
for
It is.
painting
It takes
and
paint
kit
well,
bashing. Yeah.
and kit bashing can, because it's so small as well. Like you say, it's forgiving. You can just kind of chuck a bit here and a bit there, and because you're seeing it from so far away, you don't notice the little join lines. You don't notice that, oh, I took a bit. There's a bit too much elbow or a little bit too little elbow because it's so far away, um, and so small. Even when you get it up close, that it really doesn't matter. So you can really throw yourself into it. So yeah,
Although saying it doesn't matter, I should point out that you also did cut out all of the kind of 2D flat surfaces. You know, all the bits that the internet went very internety over when the sculpts were first revealed, which I think are fine. Like people, they're all single piece. Like no, it's an amazing job the sculptors who did it, like really cleverly put together to try and get all those different poses in. I mean, I've got some of the old epic, and they're all so monopose. And I don't mean monopose as in you can't change the pose. I mean they have a single pose, and their boulders are here, clutch tight to them because that way you don't have to worry about hiding all the joins. And now we've got like kind of all the different positions the 28mm kit can get in. So a little bit of plastic between the chain bayonet and the knee. I don't care about that, but at the same time, it is possible to shave it out if you do care about it, like some of my Kitbashes do, and like your entire army did. So
it took me so
I can
long.
imagine. But like I say, it was an amazing thing to look at.
But it's one of those things as well. If you do want to do it, it will take you ages the first 5 times you do it. By the time you get to your 20th time of doing it, you'll have got into a rhythm. That's what I did. I just sat down with all the guys of one type I was going to do it with, and just did it in an evening with a film on in the background. And by the end of it, I was just kind of doing it by reflex, and it became so easy. So if there's a thing that annoys you, just take it off. It's like all of my Alpha Legion guys don't have the chain bayonets on them either, because I thought that running around with lots of things that were revving up wouldn't be particularly stealthy. And they look amazing without chain bayonets on. Just the bolters in kind of a more compact, what you recognise as bolters, especially coming from a 40k background like I do. I'm not used to the chain bayonets and stuff like that. So you can take all of it off. It's so easy as well to take off. That if these are things that are bothering you, just get rid of them because it can be done.
Yeah. Cool. Well, speaking of your list, seeing as I have got it up and seeing as I'm sure lots of people watching this, lots of them are very kind of super into the kit bashing and the hobby and are really wanting to hear all your tricks. Others of them are just like, tell me how to win this game. Tell me how to what do I win? So on that note, I'm looking at this list, and I think when you first sent it to me, the first thing I said was there is no waste on this list. Absolutely every single thing is tight. Lots of max strength detachments, but min strength formations. So, like your demi companies, only the minimum number of slots. An HQ support, a couple of cores, but all of them are full to try and get as much out of them as possible. Was that something you knew you were going to do? Did you know you were going to just get as many formations as possible with?
Yeah. So the reason I wanted yes with the Alpha Legion, no with the Imperial Fists. The reason there's two formations of Imperial Fists is because I wanted 4 units of 4 tactical 8 missile launchers. I wanted 4 of those units, and as you can only have 3 core in a formation, and you need 2 to create a formation, that's why there's 2 formations. Had I been able to take 4 core in one formation, there would probably only be 1 Imperial Fist formation. The Alpha Legion, the reason that it got spread over 3 formations rather than I could have got it into 2 was you get 3 infiltrating detachments per formation. So having 3 formations allow me to infiltrate 9 detachments, whereas only having 2 formations would have only let me infiltrate 6 detachments. And when you take into account that when you're infiltrating a HQ squad and a tactical, that's 2 detachments, because they're not attached to each other when you give them the infiltrate, and if you don't give infiltrate to the commander, then the rest of the unit can't. So I needed the number of infiltrations, which is why it split down, because I wanted to have all of my Leviathans infiltrating, and that was 3 units. I know I needed a couple of the HQ units up front to allow my Imperial Fists to change into First Fire, and I knew that people would stay out of the range of my anti-air, so they had to be as far forward as possible to try and either keep them in their deployment zone or try and clip their deployment zone. So there was nowhere they could put their flyers where I couldn't get a shot off at them. So yeah, the kind of maximum size units was to make sure that everything had redundancy, that you couldn't just do a little bit of fire and then they're no longer a problem. I wanted them to be big and chunky, and even when they'd taken wounds, still be a threat. And the amount of formations came out of how many of one type of unit I wanted for the Imperial Fists, and how many infiltrates I needed or felt I needed for the Alpha Legion.
Wow. Something you said there that made me go, yep, that definitely happened, was needing the tarantulas to be infiltrated, because no matter how far forward, with the exception of one of the maps, I think, which was the diamond one, and you were able to get it kind of right in the corner of the opposite sides. You put the Hyperios kind of along the line, and people, when they bring in their vehicles or they bring in their aircraft, they just make sure they're ever so slightly out of range of them, and at that point, they're gone, because unless they're hovering, they don't even stake on the board. They go away and come back again, usually to the same place, and tarantulas can't move. So if you are able either to infiltrate tarantulas to the middle of the board, rules as written, I don't think there's anything stopping you sticking tarantulas in a rhino or a drop pod either. I think it may seem a bit silly having immovable objects, jump out of a truck, but modeling wise, there is a little commander in the tank, even if there's no one in the tank. So maybe that guy just gets out, sets up some tarantulas.
And in lore, they are deep struck.
Yeah.
Tarantulas are deep struck. So having them in drop pods, sure, might seem a little bit silly, but it's an automated drop pod. This is 40k. There are machines that do things. So and it might even be a really cool like modeling potential if you want to do it, is having a drop pod with some mechanical arms that looks like it's hit the ground and then it's set the tarantulas up around it. It's just like, servitor in the middle, loads of arms, it sets them up.
Yeah.
Like in lore, there's loads of in the olden 40k rules. I can't speak for heresy. You used to be able to put tarantulas in rhinos because you could just dump them out the back and they would set themselves up. They were these automated turrets that couldn't move once they'd been deployed, but they have to be able to get from the factory to where you're deploying them. And Space Marines love throwing things out of ships.
If nothing else, they're called tarantulas. That invokes the idea of these little legs kind of going click, 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 and then, like I say, locking in, sending in their bolts to make sure that when they fire their rockets, they're not blasting themselves backwards.
They just fall over.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from a lore point of view, doing it, and rules is written, they're infantry, they can go anywhere that infantry can go. So if you're feeling that they're not doing what they need, maybe stick them in drop pods.
Something else rules that's interesting about can't remember that. Automated, is it automated sentinel with the rule they
automated,
have? Yeah. That's done model by model, which is something we realized in the rules. So if one, like the unit isn't given an activation, the unit just has this rule, and in your movement phase it can activate. But when the unit activates, each measurement is done model by model, so it's entirely possible for different tarantulas in your detachment, automates towards a different unit. So if someone's very carefully put themselves out of range of most of them, but one of them can still hit, that one can still hit, and then the other three can go hit something else that's a viable target, which also means you can, if you fancied it, you could mix tarantula units and not lose any shooting from it. Like, just because your Hyperios are aiming towards the nearest flyer, that doesn't mean that your lasers are also focused towards there. The lasers would then follow their own targeting priority. So there's something came up on the weekend that we realized that, that rule is done model by model, not unit by unit. So, of all of them, mix and match if you fancy it. Obviously, I think the Hyperios are the more competitive option, but seeing as you get both in the kit and you want to use them, if you want to have them all as one detachment, you can, and you don't lose any shooting from it, which is fun.
I didn't know that. I've been just doing the measurement from the closest one. One of the things I did learn, because it was a question that I asked, because it came up in my fourth game, and then it became important in the fifth, was what happens if you put a command squad in a unit of them, because they're infantry, so command squads can go in them. At this point, do they now get an order? So can they Overwatch?
I think I heard the discussion happening, and I think I agree with the ruling that they can't, because it's when special rules clash, there's always the question about which special rule takes precedence. But one of them is, if a detachment, like the automated sentry rule, a detachment with the automated sentry rule cannot be given an activation. And I think that's the thing that stands.
Yes. That's where it came. However, that opens up some more questions, because the interaction, as it was explained, and it makes perfect sense, and I'm totally behind it, is that the HQ is added to the detachment. And as the automated sentry says, this detachment doesn't get an order. The detachment that the unit is joining is the primary detachment. That is the detachment whose rules you follow.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's the primary detachment. I think that the detachment still has that, like a detachment that is a command model plus a command model plus another detachment, or say mixed dreadnought detachments. I think those detachments have all the keywords and all the weapons that are in any of the models that are there. So a tactical detachment with plasmas and bolt guns in there, that detachment has bolt guns and plasmas. Like that's what it has. Then on an individual model level, some of them have one, some of them have the other, but the detachment still has both weapons. So I think when an HQ joins a another group, in this particular example, one with automated sentry, that detachment has commander, has inspiring presence. It also has automated sentry. That detachment
And
has that.
because the automated
And so
sentry
the
rule
rules, yeah.
says that
So
this detachment doesn't get this,
doesn't
they
get this.
don't get it.
Yeah.
But that
So if it was individual model by model, if it was, if the commander rule said can choose a model and change it, so in maybe split fire or treat an independent model or something, maybe then, but it doesn't. It says it gives it can change or give a detachment a a different order. But I think that is superseded, like was ruled, by the fact that automated sentry cannot be given an order. That's not a thing that can happen. So yes, it is interesting, and particularly when we're talking about army formation, detachment, model. And actually, model doesn't mean model; it means base, which sometimes is one model, sometimes is 5 models, sometimes is whatever. So there's all these different levels. So I think when something affects a detachment, that detachment is treated as having all of the component parts. But then some rules say models. So, for example, models with independent can be a bit further away from the rest of the detachment, but the detachment therefore has independent as a rule, but some of the models don't have independent within it. This is when we are getting a bit kind of very sweaty and I wonder.
well, it's I feel that the sweatiness comes in when the arguments come in, which is why when I asked the question at the event, it was just give me a yes or a no. I don't care what the yes or no is. I will put over my opinion. But if you and when they said no, I was like, awesome, cool, good to know.
Yep.
I asked because I'd done it because I just didn't have another unit to put them in at the time of deployment, and it says if they can't go in another unit, they have to go on their own, and I didn't want them on their own, so I was just like, I'm going to throw them in there. And then my opponent was the first person that went, oh, they don't have an order because they've got a guy without the thing in him. And I was like, oh, do they get one? And he was like, yeah. So in that game, they got one. And then I went at the end of the fourth game to the judge and went, did we do that right? And he said, no, you didn't do that right. How I read it is, well, for most of it, it was, I can't see anything that stops you. And then we got to, but you probably shouldn't. Which is why then we came to the conclusion that it says this detachment doesn't get an order. So it doesn't matter whether it's got a model in there that doesn't have the thing. If, like you said, if it says this detachment, it means the whole thing, no matter what's in there. If it says this model, then you worry about it model per model.
Yeah.
But I need to now go back and read Deep Strike and see if that says this detachment. Because if you do, that means you can put command bases in Terminator units and Deep Strike them. And that means I can do a conversion of a Terminator command squad, which would be badass.
I think I did. I did look it up because I wanted to. I've made a Terminator command squad. My Typhon command squad are all Terminators, but I think when I looked it up that it was if all models in this detachment
if all models have it,
yeah, because otherwise, the taking 8 Terminators in as a kind of tactical upgrade, that would potentially mean all of them could deep strike, which doesn't seem right. So
if they had independent, they could. That's the other thing. Because
they could, but then would have to stay still 6 inches away. So they could deep strike, but they deep strike pretty close to the rest of the team anyway.
But if you, it's actually covered in independent. So in the future, we will see things that are independent and deep strike. And if you deep strike within 6 inches of your home detachment, they don't scatter.
Oh.
Which is why I thought they could. In my brain, I was like, "That's it. That sounds like teleport homers to me." And then when I went back to the book, I was like, "Oh, Terminators don't have independent; it's only assault marines." But yeah, it's actually a thing that is covered in the rules. Is what happens if you have independent deep strikers with a unit and they deep strike. They have to deep strike and stay within the 6 inches, but they don't scatter if they do. But if the home detachment's been blown up before they deep strike, they scatter.
Well, we know that there are other Space Marine Corps units coming because the Demi Company rules say in a Demi Company, all the compulsory core have to be tactical squads, which at the moment they all have to be anyway because that's all we've got. So that implies we have got other core options coming in the future. Maybe scouts would have teleport homers and you can infiltrate them a bit further and then they will have independent deep striking Terminators as a addition.
There's so many cool possibilities. Like I
Yeah,
thought, are they going to introduce veteran tactical squads? So smaller unit size, because obviously in Heresy, tactical squads can go up to 20 man, but they only have one type of weapon, whereas
yeah,
veteran tactical squads are more what you'd think of a tactical squad in 40k, where there's 10 of them, and some of them got special weapons, some of them got heavy weapons. And are they going to be able to have independent Terminators because they're a more elite unit, so they can carry teleport hypers? Are we going to get the scout dudes with the sniper rifles, like you said, and they're going to be able to call in off? There's so many cool. It's interesting. I love seeing the rules that exist in the book that aren't used anywhere,
yeah.
because it
They're
gives,
clearly future-proofed rules.
like like when you've got commanders, they have to go into another unit. But if there
Yeah,
isn't another unit, then they deploy independently. There is another version of that in the book that is you have to attach this to a unit of the same type. But if there isn't a unit, it gets destroyed and can't be deployed.
interesting.
So I'm
I
thinking like not apothecary bases, like chaplain bases and
mhm.
librarian bases and
Yes,
stuff like that, stuff that are upgrades. But if you don't have anything to upgrade, they can't kick. They're not as independent as commanders, so they can't kick around on their own. So yeah, that's
I
another cool thing that's coming, is stuff that isn't going to be a commander, but is going to be an upgrade for another detachment.
yeah. There's if I were to predict, and I sometimes do, if I were to make a prediction for the next kind of infantry style box. So we've had the support detachment, like the support box. We've got the Vanguard box coming out, and we've got the infantry box. I expect there will be another infantry box, and this one will have Mark III Marines in with different heavy weapon options, just a different profile, and it will have scouts and Tartarus Terminators, which may have the same rules, but just to mix things up. So I think because they seem to be dedicated to um, replicating the 28mm options in tiny version. We got the Mark 6 in the new scale, and then we got Mark 3 in the new scale. So we know that those 28mm sculpts exist. So I would think soon we'll probably get Mark 3 little ones, and it only makes sense for them to come with the other version of Terminators. And again, I think we'll probably do scouts or some other kind of core. I don't know what else will come in it, but yeah, I think we've got another Mark III focused infantry box in the future at some point.
I'd agree. Because one second, my computer's trying to turn itself off. Sorry, 1
Go
second.
for it. I'll cut this so it doesn't matter what I say.
Okay, cool.
Bum bum poo willy.
Sorry about that.
That's
My
right.
monitor went, I'm going to turn off in a minute because you're not using me. I'm like, I'm very much using you right now.
Cool. Right. Well, let's look at this. So we started talking about your list. So you've said you've got 2 maxed out detachment, minned out formations of the command squad, which you have to take in a demi company, 10 las cannon dreadnoughts, which are scary, scary things, and full missile support tactical detachments. All with, and you've got, is it 7 rhinos? Yes, 7 rhinos. So
14
is that
rhinos in total. Each formation has a block of 7.
cool? So that means you have one in its commander in a rhino and the other one deployed.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So the idea there is that it can deploy. Most missions are either 3 or 6. My brain's gone dead. It just wants to say capture points. Objectives. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. And they're always kind of split across the board. So the concept of having those 2 detachments built that way is that I could either flank them, so put them on the far edges of each side, or deploy a few in the middle, and the guys in the rhinos would rush forward, jump out, create a firing line first turn, and the ground pounder ones would wander up in the first turn. However, if there was super important objectives in your deployment zone, Like in one of the missions we played where the opponent could burn you, you got victory points for the ones in your deployment zone, but you could burn your enemies, and they could then that stopped them getting victory points. The ground pounder guys, the guys out of rhinos, could just stay and protect those if I needed to. So it gave me an ability to either, so I could rush up with the rhino missile launchers and support the infiltrating Alpha Legion, and then the ground pounder guys could either walk forward and support the rhino guys just a little slower. They could either march and get their first turn and shoot second turn on first fire, or they could advance and still get off their 20-inch shots, but just without the rerolls. So it gave me that redundancy. But again, like you said, there's nothing wasted here. In the first iteration of the list, they all had rhinos. And then I realised that if they were going to stay back and defend home base objectives, that's 72 points of rhino that isn't really doing its job. Because unlike a Spartan, that if you don't put any dudes in it, it's still a battle tank. It's still got killer weapons on the side. And although we both love point defense weapons, I could get more for 72 points than just some rhinos with havoc launchers. So I figured just 2 sets in rhinos and then 2 sets ground pounding would give me that ability to react to where I needed them. The guys in the rhinos were always going to razz forward, and then the ground pounder dudes could do what they want. It also gave me 2 HQs, which meant I got the leadership bubble going up with each group, because I knew the guys getting out of the rhinos were going to get hammered early because they were going to be closer to the enemy, and it's going to be easier to shoot them than the ones at the back of the board. So they always took with them the guys with the extra morale and stuff like that, and also the medic. So if it got into a gunfight of tacticals versus tacticals, or even the missile launcher on its anti-infantry profile is light, they would still get the feel no pain. So that's why I've only got rhinos for half of the missile launchers. And the reason that I don't take missile launcher units is because taking them in tactical squads gives them CAF 2. They're only CAF 1 if you take them as the support option. But because you're upgraded, it specifically says in the tactical squad, you're taking tactical bases and then upgrading them to have the missile launchers, rather than how it works with the assault marines, where you attach assault marines to or terminators where you attach them, so they've got different stats. So yeah, having the redundant wounds from the tactical bases, and then having a higher CAF because close combat is so insanely bloody in this game. And my last game actually came down to us throwing everything into melee on the center line, because the last game had the 3 points, and if you controlled them and they were uncontested, you could move them 5 inches, so you could pull them back towards your line. So it just became us throwing everything. I mean, he was charging me with his tacticals, he was charging me with just everything that could charged, and then everything that could shoot normally didn't have very many targets because they were all engaged and couldn't be shot at. But I felt that +1 CAF on what I consider like the core of my army, they're the guys that are going to go and take positions, because it's all about the infantry, because they're 5 tactical strength, so they can hold more. I felt it important to have them as robust as possible. So the extra CAF, the ability to have feel no pain, the 2+ leadership with the HQ guys in them, is important for them, and not wasting points on unused rhinos as well.
Yeah, that in that last game was one of the few decisions that, like, I'm a hobbyist far more than I am a gamer, but I did do a couple of tactical moves that I thought that was actually quite good. And one of the few I did was in that last game with the row in the middle, where my Death Guard detachment meant I could make 2 areas of terrain dangerous. So I made the obstructing terrain squares dangerous terrain instead, which then meant he had to go the long way around to get to those objectives from his place. Also, if I broke him and he ran, which he did a couple of times while he was contesting those objectives. He ran into dangerous terrain and invariably lost all his saves and essentially just tripped over and died. And also, because I had Death Guard contesting one of the objectives, rather than moving it towards me, I moved it back towards him, putting it in dangerous terrain, which my Death Guard didn't care about. So my Death Guard Leviathans were able just to sit around the objective, overwatching anything that tried to come near, and anything that wasn't killed by the overwatch was killed by the dangerous terrain. So that particular map did well for my list.
It's genius use of that rule.
Yeah. Cool. So we've spoken about the Imperial Fist attachments. Now I don't know. It's hard to say the most heavy hitting, but certainly the thing that's hardest to prepare for is the sheer amount of infiltrating that you get from Alpha Legion, and other legions as well that you discussed also had a similar rule, Raven Guard. But yeah, the Alpha Legions one does have so much flexibility. And also, I know you care about the fluff. This kind of an ongoing meme that the Alpha Legion are traitors, except they're not traitors. They're loyalists, except they're loyalists, except they're traitors, except they're like whatever they're doing because they know something that the rest of us don't, which is good because it means you can put them with anything and it'd be very, very fluffy. Ignoring the fact that there were traitors and loyalists in every legion anyway, and the only legion that seems to really have an issue with admitting that is the Dark Angels, which I always think is hilarious that they're like, oh no, we've got this terrible secret that some of our Marines were traitors, and all the other unions are like, yeah, we've got whole kind of chapters that
there was loads of them.
We've got a list of Dave, like this is Dave, he was a traitor.
He was dodgy. But yeah, see the fluff for my guys is that they are loyalist Alpha Legion, and the
or are they? Yeah.
Or are they? No, these ones are. Or are they? Yeah. So the fluff is that basically onset of the heresy comes, the battle lines are drawn, and everyone kind of starts looking at the traitor Legion dudes that they're with, going, "Are you bad guys?" And the commanding officer of the Alpha Legion actually outed one of the other officers as an undercover Alpha Legion, because obviously in the lore we've got a lot of Alpha Legion that paint themselves up as other chapters and run around pretending to be other chapters, and basically points out that no, this NCO you've got in your Imperial Fist isn't an Imperial Fist, is actually an Alpha Legion, and he's one of the dodgy ones and I'm one of the good ones. Which
so basically, it was so nice for Alpharius to out Alpharius like that.
They do that to each other a lot. But then the Imperial Fist commander was basically given a choice from his higher ups, which was get rid of them all or trust them. But if you trust them, they're your responsibility. So I've got a little bit of a story written about.
Can we keep him bad? Can we please? Just holding a snake with 8 heads. I'm gonna name him Alpharius. Oh, what a good
Alpharius 14. So yeah, he kept them around, and basically they turned out to be super loyal, super awesome, and that's why the force is called the Fist of the Hydra. Is
which is a kick-ass name for anyone, like Fist of the Hydra.
Fist of the Hydra.
It implies that not just their heads come up, but oh no, my fist. Now I have 8 of them. Punch.
Too. But yeah, the lore, especially that it's evolving, because obviously any true fluff monkey will take the results of last weekend and put them into his next event that he's going to next week, which I have done, and the heavy losses suffered by the Imperial Fists meant that there's actually more Alpha Legion kicking around now. So the Alpha Legion have actually taken more of a lead and deployed even more of their dreadnoughts.
Interesting. I'm sure that there is no ulterior motive and everything will be fine.
Everything will be fine. Yes.
Pay no attention to the Inquisitor behind the curtain.
I wish there were Inquisitors in.
It might happen.
It'll be amazing. Well, they don't get formed until the end of the heresy.
No, but I think in the heresy there's lots of this kind of like, oh well, they don't technically exist yet, but this pre version of it exists. It's like, oh, the warp hadn't crystallized demons into the the forms we know them now. But we've got these what like kind of warp mess demons that kind of have little bits of all the demon gods in them. They'll find a way. They'll
Yeah,
you know
it'll all come out.
if the money is there, they'll make it to buy.
The money is there.
So
But yeah,
the consistent things in your Alpha Legion list are the Siege Dreadnoughts, which are nice, even if we never got to shoot them very often. You know, they do a lot of damage in close combat. Min strength tactical detachments. Most of them are garrisons, so you haven't got the option for transport as such, but you did get drop pods for one of your demi company Alpha Legions.
yes. So I have a demi company of Alpha Legion and 2 garrison forces. So the garrison forces don't need transports because they can infiltrate. So they're either infiltrating forwards, or the other minimum strength tactical detachments were there because because objectives are sticky in Legion Imperialis. So I figured that even if my objectives weren't particularly important to the enemy, having a unit to start on them and then kind of run after the guys, because they can't start moving until after the first turn if you want to capture the objective, because the stickiness isn't recorded until the end of the turn. Which is why I didn't want them to be big and bashy units that would factor into my game plan particularly. They just needed to be there to grab the home objectives and then run forward, or help the remaining Imperial Fists if I did have home objectives I wanted to, by fanning out in front of them and basically sacrificing themselves for the glory of terror. And thus proving that they were loyalists by giving their lives so the Imperial Fists may continue to missile launcher stuff.
And then eventually lead Dawn to be in just the right place to get his hand chopped off.
I mean, that wasn't them. They did nothing.
No, they did
No
nothing
one
to arrange that.
that wasn't the thing that happened. But yeah, so again, the minimum size tactical stuff in the Alpha Legion was more because I needed it. I'd quite like to see, like in the table, the 28 mil, where you can have dreadnought formations. That would be badass. So I didn't need the tactical guys, but they did serve a purpose. They held a lot of objectives. They all banded together. The 3 of them that hang around in my deployment zone banded together and beat up some Terminators in one of my games, which was great fun to watch. But yeah, they're mainly there as the Alpha Legion formations are there to deliver the Dreadnoughts and the Hyperions. With the Dreadnoughts being there, the drop pods being there because I wanted to have a HQ in a drop pod that I could bring down when I desperately needed to change an order somewhere on the board. I could just drop pod my guy down, because if you stick the drop pod on top of the unit that you want to do the order change for, especially if they're not near too much terrain, you stick it on top of that, it can scatter up to 6 inches, but because there's multiple drop pods, you can then put the second drop pod 2 inches back towards where you want, and then get out 2 inches with the commander, and then you're within 2 inches, and you need to be within 6 inches of. So even if they couldn't, you're always going to scatter to within 6 inches of the thing that you want to change the order to. So they were there to be able to make either my dreadnoughts get their orders changed, or in later to keep them in reserve so they couldn't get shot up. So in later games, when I don't know, put a first fire order on one of my Imperial Fist units to blow some stuff up, and then the entire of their army ran away from them, I was able to drop pod down, jump out, change their order to an advance, and they were all able to follow up. So the Alpha Legion were my kind of clunkier, gamier formations. They were put in because it was a competitive event. If I'd been going to a storyline weekend or something like that they do up there sometimes, it would have been Imperial Fists and Blood Angels. But so the Alpha Legion went in, and so even more so, everything in the Alpha Legion formations has a job. It's going to do this. It can do this if it needs to. Like the Leviathans, I wish they could all have had cyclonic melt lances, because the idea was they're going to charge, and if they can't charge, they're going to move around and melt a gun tanks. Um, the HQs and tactical detachments that were infiltrating were specifically there to change orders. The Hyperion defenses were there to take out planes, and they needed the infiltrate to go in, which is why they're a little bit more min-maxy than my Imperial Fists, with the tiny units of tactical, because I need them, because they're attacks on the things, and then maximum size units of Dreadnoughts, and at least upgraded units of Hyperions. I wasn't able to take maximum size units of them, but they are 6s rather than 4s. Again, to give them a bit of redundancy, that if they start getting shot, that they are still a threat. Even 2 Hyperions is a threat to an aircraft, especially with the reroll from tracking. But if you've only got 4, then you can only afford to lose 2 before they stop being a threat. If you've got 6, then you've got to lose. I played the numbers there a little bit. So yeah, and sticking them in how I did was all very. The only thing that I didn't particularly want that was in there was the Death Storms. Now the Death Storms are in there because, funny story, it's not that funny actually. It's not understanding the rules properly. So in the book, there's 2 places that talks about allies, and because it takes a while to get a rules question answered by Games Workshop, and a lot of the time it's just we'll ask the rules team and it'll come out in an FAQ. Is in the book, there's 2 places that talks about allies, and one is you get 30% of points available, and one is you got 30% of points spent. And as I wanted to take Mr. Stumpy, who's up here behind me, and he's 750 points, which is exactly 30% of 2,500. I had to spend every point.
Exactly, yeah.
I had to spend every point in case that was the actual rule. And
yeah, the rule is 70% of your force must be your main thing. So yeah.
It's been clarified by the guys that it's available points. So if you've got 2,500 points, you can take Mr. Stumpy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's more fun. Maybe just because I'm an old Warhammer Fantasy head, really. Like, that was my biggest game, was kind of Warhammer Fantasy in the old days. So I'm looking forward to actually playing some Old World now. But part of the fun was thinking, I've got 2 more points here, which means I can put a shield on this guy, but that means I can do trying to squeeze every tiny little fractional thing. And I think that is what some of the games are lacking now. I know deliberately so. They're trying to limit how much, tiny fractional points there are, particularly with 40k now, with buying in blocks, with all weapon options already counted in, which I think is fun, that actually Legions Imperialis is more granular than 40k, because you can pay extra for an extra tighter weapon, or to stick Havoc launcher on your Rhino, which in 40k is just all included. So it's fun that epic scale actually is more granular than 40k now. So I know they've been trying to do that for a while. They tried to do it with power levels and it didn't stick. So now they've just kind of gone for the whole, okay, we'll just buy in blocks with points, which I understand that, but I do like no, I want to get every single point out of this, even if it's something I don't want, even if it's like these Death Storms aren't going to win me the game, but they're 32 points, and that 32 points is very important.
They would have been an assault squad detachment, which were 30 points, but I needed to spend 32 points, so they became one. I got 1 assault squad and 1 Death Storm as the support in my 2 Alpha Legion garrison forces.
Did the Death Storms win their points back? Were they worthwhile? Do you think you'd use them again? No.
No. They fired in one game. They got to fire in one game. In that game, they were actually amazing. They blew up a Kratos. They blew up a plane. They took out they broke his Space Wolf formation, which then.
Okay, can we just say you heard it here first, with the gold #1 top blazing list? death storms, wiped out a Kratos tank, wiped out a plane, broke a formation. Not worth the points. Not
worth the points. And that's in the entire weekend. That's all they did.
Okay.
In one game, they were amazing. And for the rest of the weekend, I deployed them. They got shot. I looked sad.
That sounds like my Xiphon interceptors. I took 2 Xiphons, individual Xiphons, and in most games, they were just kind of overwatched out of the sky immediately. But in my last game, whether by rolling well or not only did they actually get to intercept stuff, given their name, they were able to wipe out one other plane each on intercept alone, and then took out another one each in one turn with their normal guns. And they survived the whole game up until the last turn we played, where I used one which I knew was going to be killed because there was all this Overwatch. So I put the one there, and I knew it was going to be Overwatched out. It was. I put the other one straight back there. Now nothing could Overwatch it, and it took out everything else. So, but again, they did really well in that last game, and that's the thing I've got in my head now. Oh, the last game I had, those Xiphons did well, so I'll remember that and stick them in every list. But actually, if I'm looking back at the other 4 games where they did nothing. Yeah, survivorship bias is real.
They're now normal troop drop pods. They're not Death Storms anymore.
I mean, on the plus side, using them as Death Storm means you get more points for your money, I suppose. Because building them normally, 24 points for being generous from a local store, £24. That's like £1 a point. That's not great.
Point.
Yeah. So so I've spoken about your Imperial Fists, kind of like the guns. We've spoken about the irony that the fists is actually more the Alva Legion side of things. But the elephant, quite literal elephant in the room of this list, is that thing behind you, Mr. Stumpy, I believe you called him.
Mr. Stumpy is his name is Ulthar Angelus, but I refer to him as Mr. Stumpy.
Well, I think actually Ultor Angelus comes from the Latin, with Ultor meaning Mr. and Angelus meaning Stumpy, so that kind of works.
Mr. Stumpy.
Yeah. So the one thing I want to ask, because I've just built mine, and I build by how it looks, and I much preferred the missile pod's looks on the shoulders compared to the sticky out turbo lasers. Does that mean now I've completely wasted it and I should, pry them off and put on the turbo lasers like you have? Or
I don't think so. In fact, I believe the missiles were one of the things I was considering taking, because originally when I built it, it had the chain guns. It had the they are called Vulcan Megaballs. I had the Vulcan Megaballs originally, because I come from Titanicus. Titanicus is what got me into 8mm, and in that, the shooter decides the order that it's applied in. So in Titanicus, you use the Vulcan Megabolts to drop the shields, and then you use the big guns to blow the engine up. How it works in Legion is the other way round, is that the defender gets to apply them. So originally I had him built with the chain guns to take down shields, and then the big plasmas. He was built to take himself out, which is another thing I do when I'm list building, is if I'm going to invest something like a Titan, I build it so it can take its opponent's version out in Alpha Strike. However, once I found out about the shield thing, I was still, I want one because they're huge and they're stompy and they're awesome, but I changed it from them to the what did they end up with the turbo laser destructors, because again, hitting on 4s, -3 AP against everything, 40-inch range, accurate, just seemed really, really good. But the Apocalypse missile array, you're running 8 dice, hitting on 4s, your heavy barrage, so you start barraging down on buildings and blowing stuff up. If my idea for the Titan was, like I said, I have everything do one thing and then it can do another thing on top. My Titan is built to take out other Titans or super heavies, like big stuff, and then on the side it can also take out planes because it has the defense platforms, which are Anna. It was never built to touch infantry. It doesn't care about infantry; they are mere ants to it. apart from the last game where it overwatched some assault marines, so they couldn't get involved in the fight. But needs must. So if you've put the apocalypse on, then you're just making its secondary thing it does infantry, which is fine. You just have to position it, make more use of your the mauler, the 8-inch range mauler anti-infantry guys. Probably if you've taken that, you probably want to take the bombard turrets because they're barrage and ignore cover and stuff like that. So you've gone for more of a. Its main guns are always going to be to take out big things because that's just what the Caesarians do. They hit things and make them disappear because they're engine killers and stuff like that at closer range, and that -4 AP just is anti-armor. So they're always going to target tanks or other titans and stuff like that. But no, I don't feel that there's anything massively wrong with some of the weapons on the War Master. There are some that are arguably better than others. But I think it comes down to a playstyle, what you want its secondary thing to be. So no, I don't think you've wasted them.
That's good because I generally speaking I build because I like the look, and I try I dry fit a few of them, and the sticky out pointy things just didn't look as good as these massive great big Blastoise shoulder missiles. But yeah, it's a nice kit. I will my whole force is Isfahan 3 themed, so all my warlords are going to be Legio Vulpa. My warhounds are Legio Oldax, and the kind of big like Reavers and War Masters. And eventually, when I make it, the Imperator are going to be Legio Mortis, and that's going to be my Titan Maniple supporting all my tiny little dudes. So it's nice to know I don't need to snap it off and stick on the penis shoulders.
Mine are all magnetized.
Oh, see, there you go. That's the way forward.
Then you can take anything.
Yeah. So I said this in my roundup. Small Titans did nothing basically at the weekend. I had one game where my Reaver did anything. The rest of the time, it just it just failed to do anything and then died. But the War Masters invariably seem to do well. It seemed to be either everyone just focused fire on them and it just was a big distraction, which meant you could do everything else, or people just thought, I'm not going to be able to deal with that, ignored it, and it just got to go around blasting anything it wanted. So I think certainly at any level you're able to take them, a War Master seems well worth 750 points.
The War Master is my first pick in it. From 2,500 points up, Mr. Stompy will make an appearance because 1, the kit is amazing and the model is fantastic. 2, I just think there's something amazingly cool about having something that is the same size as a 40k knight, but in a game where Marines are this big.
Yeah.
That makes me smile. And it's just useful. They are just powerhouses of death.
It also makes a fun graph. I don't know, I might make this as a graph and stick it in post, but in terms of how expensive the mini is, like points wise, how many points the mini cost and how worthwhile it's taking, and it just being like, oh, cheap units, oh, expensive units, not worth taking. Waymaster. It's like,
me up here. Just take one.
Yeah.
My last opponent literally finished the game with me, packed up his models, shook my hand and stuff, not like packed up his models and walked away, but because he was a lovely guy, such a great guy. Packed everything away, said his goodbyes to everyone, walked to Warhammer World Shop, bought one, came back and waved it at me and went, bought one.
Nice. So talking about your list again, say that the War Master is always first to be put in if you're at a points level that allows it. You've said you're not going to take Deathstorm drop pods again. Anything else you could say looking at this list, given that it was the best list of the weekend? And no, I say that probably also down to your amazing tactical decisions on top of that as well. Well, no, it is because you've been describing tactical decisions throughout. Like getting even just talking about drop pods with me on Facebook. What you need to do is you need to get a commander in a drop pod, and then Dreadnoughts in the drop pod, then you can drop the Dreadnoughts, then get them out, then get the commander out, then you can give them a charge order, then they can charge on the turn they come out of the drop pod, because now it's an assault. So yeah, you've got the tactics in there, but obviously the list and the tactics, squished together, and the fact you've got the painting and the fluff as well makes you a triple threat. So in terms of this list, thinking about what actually did cause you issues, were there any games that made you go, I could have done that better, this could have been more optimized? What would you change if you were to do the exact same tournament again, and knowing that you wouldn't have to change anything because you would win, but if you were to fight the same opponents, if you were to go through again, what could you do to make it easier for yourself? What could you do to improve on this already pretty optimized list?
So that has been a thought. If I was trying to make it as optimized as possible, which is what I do for competitive events, the Twin Link Las Cannon Dreadnoughts from the Imperial Fists would be my support for my garrison companies, so I could infiltrate them as well. Because having them with a 22-inch range did mean they got to fire, but it meant that they could choose their targets less. And just infiltrate was amazing. Was just, you could have them in exactly the right place that you needed them from turn one. So if I was trying to optimize this, I'd probably put the assault marines. I'd not take the Death Storm, and I'd take another unit of assault marines as my two supports there, and I'd move those two units of assault marines into the fists, and I'd move the dreadnoughts from the fists into the Alpha Legion, because that would still allow me to infiltrate the command squads that I needed, but it would also let me choose whether I wanted to infiltrate command squads or whether I wanted to infiltrate dreadnoughts, and in some games infiltrate both, and not infiltrate, because there was a couple of games with people who, like me, had gone, I'm not taking planes, at which point I don't need to infiltrate the Hyperioses, so I could infiltrate dreadnoughts instead. I think it would give me more kind of control over what I did with them, whereas when they were in with the Imperial Fists, they had to foot slog it whether I liked it or not. And the Assault Marines are fast enough that even if they are Imperial Fist Assault Marines, they'll get where they need to be by the time they really need to be there, as they're just going to be a second wave assault column there. I would remember to shoot with my Leviathans more. That's one. And the second, another thing that I realised I wasn't doing, which was really annoying me, was the size difference thing, where if you charge something that's bigger than you, they can just walk out of combat. They don't have to stay in combat with you. Is I'd have started using the rhinos from turn 2 onwards to charge those things first, and then charge my Leviathans in and lock them in combat with the rhinos first. Something that I didn't do, and then at the end of the tournament went, oh my god, I could have done that. But the list wise, like I say, apart from dropping the Death Storms down to another set of Assault Marines, and switching them over, I'd like to try and eke the points out to upgrade the Hyperioses to Dreadnoughts. I think having anti-air that can move, so you can eventually close that gap with their deployment zone, so there's nowhere they can deploy. And also because I didn't realise the interaction of Skyfire, as it was pointed out to me by one of my opponents who spent the game overwatching me with Dreadnoughts on the ground, is that Skyfire is -1 to your Overwatch rather than -2, whether you're shooting at something in the air or not.
Yeah.
So so that they would make a good support for the Leviathans if I could take some Dreadnoughts, because they would be able to do the Overwatch, which is a slightly better Overwatch because they're sky firing, so they're only -1 rather than -2, and then I would then be able to use my Leviathans better, but with some fire support. So that's something that I'm just playing with. But obviously the points difference. It's 85 points for 4 Drudeos. It's 51 points for the 6 Hyperiuses. Can I find those, 34 points per unit in the rest of the list? I don't think so. I think
No.
it's so tight where it is already that I would just have to be more aggressive with my deployment of, because I normally put them on the middle line, which I think wasn't aggressive enough. I think I needed to really push them forwards. But yeah, list wise, it would just be second assault marine squad and swap the dreadnought talons into the Alpha Legion and put the assault marines in the Imperial Fists. And it's kind of what I started to do in my 1500 point army for next week, until I realised how much I love the Imperial Fist dreadnoughts that I painted. So they're still going, and some of them are still going in the list because
Yeah.
I want people to look at the models and go, "Ooh, they're pretty."
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
that's the most important thing. However sweaty and mathsy we want to be, the important thing is when you paint something and you're really proud of it, you want to use it, even if you know it's going to be the first thing blown off the table. It's worth it.
it's and I mean it's. I was going to take a unit of Terminators,
Mm.
and then 2 10-man units of um, Alpha Legion Dreadnought Talon. But in the end, I did 2 8-man units of Alpha Legion Dreadnought Talon and a 6-man unit of Imperial Fist Dreadnought Talons. Because 1, I've got them painted already and I don't have to paint more stuff. 2, I only had enough Plasma Dredeos to make 16 Plasma Plasma Contemptors, because I've got the okay from head office, from the events team, to use my Plasma Contemptors as last cannon Contemptors, as long as I tell my opponent at the beginning of every match. So they are understanding about conversions as well, which is
Yeah, they were with mine as
massive.
well, because I've got loads of conversions, and I sent them in like as opposed to did all my proper things, saying, "Hey, is it cool if I do this?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's fine as long as they're pretty and it's obviously not just modeling for advantage." Which I don't think it's possible to do at this scale, really, to model to advantage. Yeah, it's I'm sure someone out there, and I've seen some really good kneeling missile launchers. But even then, I don't think that would make enough difference to count as modeling for advantage. No, I think this is a great scale for conversions, because I don't think anyone's ever going to accuse you of, being beardy about it. It's like, no, I just want my army to look like this.
I think the closest thing to modeling for advantage would be just sticking a single marine on the middle of the base.
Yeah, but even then, if you imagine the base is that's kind of modeling for financial advantage, I think, more than for in-game advantage. I think because if you imagine a base is kind of a cylinder upwards, you can see at that point. So I suppose in terms of financial solvency and lack thereof with the coming weeks, of the new models, the Dreadnought drop pods and the Vanguard fast attack units. Which of those are you most looking forward to? Which of those do you think are going to be good game wise, and which is going to be good model wise?
Dreadnought drop pods, I am well psyched about,
Yeah,
because I'm going to try a um, drop pod dreadnought assault rather than an infiltratey dreadnought assault.
yeah,
See if that changes anything. And then I could go back to my Blood Angels as well, rather than Alpha Legion, though I have become quite attached to my Alpha Legion.
yeah. Rightly so.
It will allow me to have multiple armies. So one of the things I'm thinking of doing is having a heretic army and a loyalist army that's a bit more clear cut, like your traditional heretic legions and your traditional loyalist legions.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I'm
doing a
really
similar
looking
thing
forward.
in that I'm getting a heretic army and then a heretic army.
Yeah, which is very similar. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the
Death
dreadnought
to the
drop
false
pods.
emperor. Yeah.
No, glory to the golden sun. The dreadnought drop pods really interest me because of the Palisade drop pod. Because the other little thing I'm thinking of is it's nothing that would fit in this list. It's just another idea for a funky list. Is creating my own fire bases. So everyone chases the um, the garrisons, the buildings, which is great. They are amazing, but if you also had a 6+ invulnerable save for those, or 5+ invulnerable, I can't remember what the Palisades are, 6 or 5, for those ignore cover stuff, what if you could create a more robust unit in the open? And that's the concept of dumping a palisade in the middle, a bunch of drop pods around it, and then a bunch of Marines using those drop pods as cover. So you've got cover, you've got the palisades power field, and you've got the ability to deploy it wherever you want on the battlefield, give or take 6 inches, thanks to the scattering. Again, that was inspired by a bit of art that I really love. It's another thing that I think will be really good in the game, but has come from my love for fluff. Was there was an old bit of art in one of the Marine codexes that was a double-page spread, like black and white sketchwork, and it was a massive city defense of Ultramarines versus Tyranids. And right in the middle of the Tyranid swarm, there were these 4 drop pods, and the Marines had like deployed as if the drop pods were towers on a wall. So there were 10 Marines drop pod in a big square, and then there was a command squad in the middle commanding the forces. And I was like, that looks really cool. And I tried to do it in 40k, and it never worked because drop pods were, doing that was half my army, and they never landed anywhere near each other because one would scatter that way, one would scatter that way, and I could never do it. But with the drop pods, you put the first one down, and then you put the rest 2 inches away from that. You can put it in. If you have a palisade be your first one, you can then kind of make a circle around it. So you could make a square, but then you try and fit your commander one in it. But if I make a circle, I can have like a circle of dudes with a command dude in the middle and a palisade drop pod in the middle. That's got me quite enthused about them. The fast attack guys, I less than enthused about. I think they are some of the most shockingly bad units that they've introduced.
Yeah, competitively, I don't think they're going to be great. I think particularly because it's notable they're the only units not to have any discount for bulking up a unit. So however much the unit costs, min-size units or kind of enhancing a formation will cost the same, which implies that they want you to take lots of small units, but they're so weak if you're taking lots of small units. They're all going to break immediately. So, I mean, I'm going to get one because a whole bunch of World Eaters bikes is, fluffy and terrifying, but I don't think they're going to do amazingly on the table.
I'll end up with some eventually because the White Scars were at the battle for the palace in fluff, so I will, for my fluffy list, get some White Scars in there. I'm not sure which of the units they will be, but yeah, they won't be a run out and get. Like, I'm getting like 5 boxes of the Dreadnought drop pods, but none of them for now. I think they're one of those things that someone will find a use for them. Someone will find something to do with them. They do have a bunch of point defense on the if they were slightly bigger units, because they're mainly 2s in their base points. So 30 odd points for 2 bases. I think the biggest one is for 3 bases. And sure, they're fast, but their guns just don't have that much punch. So they're only going to be hunting infantry, which we have discussed is really good. But then you're creating a situation where you're giving yourself that rock, paper, scissors moment, because the second someone puts down, if you go heavy on them to hunt the infantry, because infantry's king, and you've got loads of plasma cannon bikes, and then suddenly someone puts down an armored company, you're like, cool. So I'm going to do very little in this, and I'm just going to hope you fail your 3-up saves. Yeah, that's why I don't particularly rate them. I think there's more you can do that is more robust for the points. But like I say, I'll get some for my fluffy list. So again, if there's ever a fluffy event up there, you'll probably see some on the table and go, Robin, I thought you said they were pants. And I'll be like,
yeah, but it's narrative. Yeah.
White Scars, they're off.
I don't need more gold holding 17 trophies. It's interesting. Speaking about the Palisade drop pods, it's interesting because I think as written, you can't take the special drop pods in a drop pod formation because there's no support. Like, or certainly you can't take Palisade drop pods. You can take Deathstorm in the support slot, but Palisades you can't buy separately. You can only buy them as an upgrade to a drop pod detachment, and you can't take upgrades to the dedicated transport drop pods. So it's interesting you can't take Palisades currently as written in the drop pod detachment formation thing. I wonder if
No,
that'll stick or whether that'll be errated at some point. Because you'd think Games Workshop would want you to, use the nice fancy drop pod models in your nice fancy drop pod formation.
I think it is a show of a little bit of balancing.
What?
Because obviously, yeah, I know, right? Who would have thought? Because if you just took drop pod detachment formations and could drop something that gave your entire army invulnerable saves, like every unit in the game could have an invulnerable save because every unit in the game could have a dedicated transport detachment that had a palisade in it. Sure, it'd be 32 points per unit, but everything on your side of the table could have a save. And I think one of the biggest things in Legion Imperialis is how bloody it is, how very quickly infantry doesn't have a save, which means that they do have a counter, which is, I roll certain dice at you and you don't even get to roll dice back. But being able to dump down a palisade with absolutely every unit, so the only counter is then combat, could create the arms race of making the game only combat. Because again, then you get people like me that are going, oh, I might meet this list, which means I'm just going to go close combat because this list might be a potential, which is why I went, I'm not taking tanks because the Lehman Russ list is a potential. I didn't see one. I saw 8 tanks, 8 Lehman Russes, sorry, over the entire weekend, and none of them had Vanquisher cannons. So the thing that I was terrified of didn't actually happen.
I wish I'd played yours because I saw a lot of Vanquishers, and my
Oh, did you?
Kratos didn't. Yeah, and my Kratos did not like them.
But that's why I didn't take credit. So,
Yeah.
and if Palisades were all over the shop, so I think that's the thing is that if you want Palisades dropping, you have to take them in demi companies, which means you can only have per HQ and 2 tactical detachment tax, if you want to see it that way, because you're trying to build as many drop pods as possible with them. You are taxed that nearly 100 points per 2 that you want to do. So it kind of balances off the ability to have an invulnerable save wherever you want on the table, whatever turn you want, because they can come down turn 1. I think it might be a balancing thing. I think we might see dedicated transport detachments not be upgradable, just as a balance mechanic.
Yeah,
But
makes
that's
sense.
a personal opinion.
Well, before we kind of bring this amazingly interesting conversation to a close, because I'm aware we have been going on for a while, and this will need to be uploaded to YouTube at some point, and I want it to be uploaded before next year. Just in terms of the future of the game, like what's your kind of vision for it? Where do you think it's going to go next? Do you think we're going to see every single unit in 28 represented? Do you think it certainly looks like the next big expansion is going to be lots of tanks? We've got the drills coming out. We need all the light armor and artillery for the Space Marines, so it looks like they're going to be quite tank heavy next. Might that change the meta? Might we start seeing more tanks and see the tanks be more useful? Who knows? So what do you kind of see as the kind of future of the game going forward?
If the rules remain the same, I think the tanks will be artillery, because artillery is sickeningly good, especially the Solar Auxilia stuff. And if the Marines get a detachment, anything like that, then I think you'll see a bunch of that coming. I think from a release point of view, like you say, they're going to fill in the slots. I think we'll then end up seeing another faction, which could be Mechanicus or Custodes, because they are the factions that we get in the lore in the 28mm game as well. I think we're going to see some specialist units come out, because we do have the rule again in the rule book that's you have to declare whether you're traitor or loyalist, and like the Sinestro warlord, can only be taken in loyalist armies. I think we'll start
Which
seeing
is a
things like
shame because it's pretty,
Marines.
but I refuse.
It is super pretty. But you could just say they're loyalist on paper, but then you'd have said it on paper and someone could find that bit of paper and prove
Hang
that
on,
you
this
said
says Maddie May Loyalist. What are you doing? Nothing. It wasn't me.
it.
Catching me in bed with a sinister titan. Nothing happened. I thought he was you.
But I think we will see more units that take advantage of that, kind of because that's where the where Titanicus went. Is that after a while we started seeing rules for loyalist and renegade legions, and you can only use this in heretics, and you can only use this in loyalists. I think it's in our hands as well how much we get. I think the more the community embraces the game, the more they'll support it. At the end of the day, they're a business. I'm not shilling for them, but the more money they make, the more they will support the game. It's just simple, kind of capitalist economics. Whether you agree with it or not, it's how it'll work until we change it.
I'm quite pleased with not with capitalist economics, but I'm quite pleased with the fact that there was that big delay for actually being released, and so some of the sprues, Adeptus stuff notwithstanding, some of the Imperialis sprues do have dates from kind of 2 or 3 years ago, but the new stuff being released does have 23, 24 on the prints, so that implies they're relatively recent sculpts, relatively recent models, which means within a year we have the chance to shout at them enough times, hey, give us demons. And then,
hey, can we have demons?
Yeah,
please.
Can I have demons, please?
Can we have demons? I think we might see Runestorm demons and Custodes done like the Legion, the Legio assets. So they can't be used as armies themselves, but are.
And I'm okay with that. I'd be very happy with that.
And it's again fluffy, super. I get why in 40k and Horus Heresy, because you're playing this much of the battlefield, you would want a full army of Custodes because you are playing that Custodes strike team. Cool, awesome, works for me. However, on a much more zoomed out level, which is what Legion Imperialis is, are they ever going to deploy? I mean, unless it's the battle in the webway, they don't really deploy the Custodes on that bigger scale. So just having them as a strike force, and with the demons, they've not coalesced properly. They're just pushing through the warp. Having it limited to that 30% is actually more narrative and more realistic.
I've just realised you saying that Ruinstorm and Custodes sound like and are the colours of Rhubarb and Custards. That's a fun image to finish on. Rhubarb and Custard boil sweets with Ruinstorm and Custodes.
Or if you're old enough to remember the Rhubarb and Custard TV show, I've now got a Custodes and a Ruinstorm demon. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That anyone watching who's an animator, make that, and it'll be the nichest. It'll be the nichest little thing. It'll get like 4 hits, but we'll all love you forever for it. So yeah. So I think that takes us to, according to my clock, 1 hour and 42 plus whatever silences I managed to trim out in the edit. But I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think we've spoken about the game, we've spoken about the weekend, we've spoken about the amazing list. And, congratulations again. I can see your trophy sitting there next to Mr. Stumpy at the back. It's
yeah.
It dwarfs Mr. Stumpy, so it's a sizable trophy.
It's huge. You could kill a man with it. And it's pointy too. Wow. It's terrible. Like, I almost thought that I was going to get clubbed around the head with a bronze place at one point because
No, that's not true, because I played the bronze place player. He was my first loss, and he was a lovely, lovely game.
To be honest, the one last thing that I'd like to say is thank you to all of my opponents and everyone that was there. Everyone was legitimately amazing, and that's what gives me hope for the system, is that those people that were there are they're the champions. They're the people that will be going to their local groups and going, hey, do you guys want to give...
A waving flag appears as an overlay now as you're talking about this. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. No, absolutely. I said that in my thing as well. Everyone was lovely. even when I was obviously frustrating by how badly my list was doing, or if someone else was frustrated with how badly their list was doing. It was always in good fun and always in good intention. And yeah, I haven't spoken to anyone who lost every single game, but I'm sure, I hope that they say it was fun as well. Certainly, the games I lost weren't any less fun than the games I won. So yeah,
the poor guy. Again, shouting him out in particular, the guy that came third, the guy that I played last, obviously had such a bad introduction to me because he came over to me while I was having the conversation about, can I Overwatch with, and he was like, I could see it in his eyes. He was like, oh my God, I'm going to play that guy. I found that guy in this entire weekend. And then luckily he gave me a chance when I got to the table. And I was like, I'm not really like that. I just needed a yes or no. The way my brain works is I don't care if it's a yes or a no. I just want a yes or no. Does it work like this? No. Cool. Awesome. I won't do it then. But if it's yes, then why wouldn't I do it? If it is a rule that you can use, why not use it? But yeah, the poor guy's face, you could see it. He was like, oh no. But we had a great game, lots of fun, towards the end there were some mistakes made by both of us, and we were both very cool, and like, even though it was the last game, it was for first place, and it still came down to oh man, I gave them an advance order when they should really have had a march order. Yeah, sure, change it. If you're telling me that's what you meant to give them, then that's what you meant to give them. There was that sportsmanship even in that last game, that that the community is good, because you get to that point where you are playing for gold, and it didn't feel like either of us were playing for gold. We were playing for the game, and it just so happened that one of us got the trophy at the end, and one of us got a slightly coloured trophy at the end.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's toy soldiers, isn't it?
Don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, we're adult people with tiny models that we've painted very carefully, going pew 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 across the table. And at the end of the day, all the cliches in the world, that's fun. It's fun to play with toys, and it's fun to play with toys if the people you're playing with are fun as well. Today's episode of Lit Bashing has been brought to you by the letter S and the number. Yeah, this can be a outtake.
There you go. Yeah, someone just put on Discord or for your Patreons.
Yeah, for my Patreons, you get to see this little. For my Patreons, you get to see Robin calling the Emperor my baddie daddy, my best baddie daddy, and this is where we cut back into the video now, and it will be like, why did it suddenly cut? And I'll say, well, because Robin called the Emperor the best baddie daddy. So everyone out there, I hope you are all being kind to your best baddie daddy. Send him a text just to say thanks for being my baddie daddy. And with that, thank you very much, Robin, for the weekend, and also for agreeing to come on and chat about your list. It's been great fun.
It's been my pleasure.
Lovely. I hope we actually get to face each other at some point, and you can see just how easy it is to completely smash a fluff list with an optimized list. It won't even be close, but it'll be fun, and that's the important bit.
Bringing one.
Oh,
if you're bringing a fluff list, I'll bring my fluff list.
Oh yeah, let's do that at some point. Next time there's a narrative event, we'll make sure somehow that we're paired up. Even if we can't, we'll stick around and play another game. Right. Well, thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone out there, for watching. Thank you to my Patreons. If you want to see the video of Robin calling the Emperor a baddie daddy, go to my Patreon. I'm sure it'll be there. And everyone out there, as always, peace and love, and keep on lit bashing. Bye-bye.